All right, so we're going to start with looking at different types of angles. There's a few names we have to understand and some of their features. So I'll just call it types of angles. Learning this isn't something that's, this isn't the end of the topic. This is actually the beginning. We have to learn the names of things and their features so that we can understand much more complicated shapes. So we're going to look at, like I said, different types of angles. So first angle we're going to look at is when you see two segments cross each other, it forms a special type of angle. So let's say this is angle 1, this is angle 2. That angle measure from there to there, whatever it is, it could be 30 degrees, 40 degrees, is congruent to this one. So when two segments cross, or two lines cross, they form these two angles that are connected to each other. These angles have a very specific name. They're called vertical angles. Now, if you look here, there's also two other vertical angles that we haven't identified. It's these two right here. So you could say that angle 3 and 4 are also vertical angles. What you can't say is something like 2 and 4 are vertical angles. They're not opposite of each other. 3 and 1 are not vertical angles. They're not opposite of each other. But 1 and 2 are opposite of each other, and 3 and 4 are opposite of each other. Maybe we should put that in here. That angles that are formed when two lines intersect and the angles are opposite. To each other. So there you go. That's vertical angles. So we'll start here with the complementary angle. The complementary angle, first off we have to start with drawing a right angle, and then we'll draw a line going through it, somewhere like that. You could draw anywhere in between these two lines. It just can't go outside of the right angle. So in this case here, drawing that line right there, we get two angles that form. We got angle 1 here and angle 2. Now they don't necessarily have to be equal to each other. If they were, it'd be 45 degrees. In this case, this looks more like it's 40 and then that would be 50. But for these to be complementary angles, what's important is that they add up to 90 degrees. So complementary are two angles they're two angles that add up to 90 degrees or that form a right angle. So for something like this, we could say that angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary angles. Something else that we can say is that the measure of angle 1, let's say it's here, for example, it's 40 degrees, and the measure of angle 2, let's say here it's 50 degrees, that it equals 90 degrees. Alright, so we saw complementary angles that were adjacent to each other. What I mean by that is you have two angles that form a right angle. So in this case, we could see that angle 1 and angle 2 form a right triangle and they're adjacent. They're attached by that line. So because they're attached by that line, these two angles are adjacent. Because they are attached to each other. Now you can also have complementary angles that are not adjacent. So for example, you have an angle up here and say an angle down here. So let's say this is angle 3 right here, and angle 3 is 50 degrees, and right here you have angle 4, and angle 4 here is 40 degrees. Well, if you just look at the measure of those angles, 40 and 50 make 90, so you know these two angles form 90 degrees, or they add up to 90 degrees, so they're complementary, but they're not adjacent. They are not attached to each other. So they're right here, not. Because there's that space in between. So these are not adjacent because they're not attached to each other. So again, another way to label angles is by saying if they're adjacent or not. Alright, so the next type of angle, we talked about complementary. We're going to talk about supplementary. So instead of trying to form a 90-degree angle, supplementary angles form a line. So we have a straight line here. Well, it's kind of straight except for that little bump. But let's say a line goes right through it here. And so you have angle 1. Let's say angle 1 right here is 60 degrees. And then over here you have angle 2. and angle 2 equals 120 degrees. If you add those two up, that's 180 degrees. So if you just add up and look at the measurements, they equal 180. Or if you just visually look at it, it forms a line. So let's talk about supplementary angles then. Supplementary angles. There are two angles that form a straight line. Or that add up to 180 degrees. Now if you look here, they're connected by this line. So the two angles share that line in common. So because they're attached by that line, they're also, these supplementary angles are also known as adjacent. So they're adjacent because of this line. So these are two adjacent supplementary angles. And then real quick, you would say that angle 1 and angle 2 if you just wrote that, that'd be fine. You don't have to write out the entire word supplementary if you want to abbreviate it. Plus, we could also say that the measure of angle 1, which is 60 degrees, and the measure of angle 2, which is 120 degrees, together they equal 180 degrees.